Okay, so today we're going to be tying a couple of different knots. First, we're going to do a leader line to the main line. We got some vanished fluorocarbon right here, 6 pound test. I usually like to start with, about an arm span length because you're probably going to break off at some point and you're going to not be wanting to retie your leader every time you break off. So first, you take your end of your line, loop it back to your other hand, and I mean, if you're right-handed, left-handed, you might hold it a little bit differently. It's all about personal preference and how you hold it. So see how I've got the line looped back towards the other end here. That's just how you want to start it. I always like to start with a good amount to wrap here as well. That'll come in handy later. So you make your loop here, and then you take your braided line, and you're just going to run that through here. If I can get a hold of it, just run it through like that. And I usually pull through, I don't know, 5 inches or so. And then after you run it through, you're going to want to take your thumb and your index finger and pinch this loop off right here with the braided line through it. Okay, so now that you've got that loop pinched and your braided line coming through, you're just going to want to wrap it around 8 or 9 times here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, now once you've got those 8 or 9 wraps going down that way, you pinch it off at the end of this wrap, and now you're going to wrap it back towards this loop here the same amount of times you went down. So I went 9 down, so I'm going to go 9 back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So once you got your 9th one around, you want to make sure you're going through the back side of this loop here. And when I say back side, I mean when you wrap it around, you come back through this way as opposed to you wrap it around and then you come back to the front and go through that way. So make sure it's coming through the back of this loop here. And you pull it through like that. I like to use my mouth just because I don't have a third hand. And then one thing that's really important as you're tightening it down here, you want to make sure you get the line wet. Otherwise, the fluorocarbon is going to break because when it gets heat stressed from friction, it loses its strength. So now that it's tightened down, you just want to really pull on it to make sure there's not a weak spot in it. But this looks pretty good. This is a great leader knot. I mean, just look at that, how low profile that is. That's going to go through your guides perfectly. Not going to have any problems getting caught on stuff, whether it's guides, lining your reel. And then last but not least, you just want to take a clippers, or if your name is Ben Donnelly, use your shark teeth. I don't have shark teeth, so I use the clippers. You just want to trim your tag ends, and you always want to make sure you're getting the end that's short and not your big long leader. I've done that before. It's pretty sad because then you got to start over. And some other knots, you don't want to clip them super tight just because they might stretch a little, but this one is not going to do that to you, so you can clip the tag ends as short as possible to ensure minimal snagging. Once I get this other end clipped off, we'll show it to you here again in a second. All right, there it is, the Alberto and or Alfredo knot. So now that you've got your leader line tied on with the handy dandy Alfredo and or Alberto, I call it the Alfredo. It's technically called the Alberto, whatever. Call it what you want, it works. So you take your leader line, obviously use the end. You don't need to loop it or anything fancy, just start with the end here and you take your hook. This is a number 6 size VMC octopus hook. So you take your line, just thread it through the eye here, pull it up, and the less experienced you are, I would probably say start with more like 4 or 5 inches, but I tie it quite a bit so I can get away with using less, and that way you won't waste as much at the end of the knot when you clip it off. So now that you've got your line threaded through, you're gonna wrap it around 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Once you've got it wrapped around 7 times, do not, I repeat, do not go more. 7 is the perfect number. If you go more, it's going to be not as strong and break. If you go less, it's going to be not as strong and come undone. So I would strongly recommend doing 7. It might be kind of hard to see here, but now there's a little loop in the line right above the eye of the hook there. Kind of hard to see, but you're going to want to take that tag end that you were wrapping around and poke it right through that little hole there. Let's do that. Just tighten it down a little bit so it's snug. And whenever you're using fluorocarbon, always get it wet. Spit works fine. You can stick it in the water if you don't feel like putting it in your mouth. And then you just tighten it down here. I always like to put the hook on something, some sort of metal ring, so you can really pull on that knot and make sure it's a good tight knot. As you can see, I'm really yanking on it here. Wouldn't really be able to do that if I was holding it in my hands. And then you just take this little tag end and clip it down. Not too close, just in case it slips a little bit, but enough so it's not poking out, and when a fish bites it, it's going to feel that. You definitely want to avoid that. So now you got your knot tied on there, throw on a couple of sinkers, and you're ready to go. Fisherman's knot.